This webinar is sponsored by my friends at IronSource. For those of you here, I'm assuming you're pretty serious about growing your games business, which is why IronSource is the perfect sponsor. These guys are industry leaders for a reason, with their growth experts and tools such as their ROAS optimizer and in-app bidding solution Level Play, taking care of your game business while you focus on developing the best products. I highly recommend checking them out. I for one wish we used these guys in the early days of Next Games. Head on over to ironsrc.com to check them out.
Right. Yeah, the floor is yours. Very warm welcome. And just one practicality, how we done it before, and tell me if you want to do otherwise. So students ask the questions in the chat, and I see the chat, and I will interrupt you and post a question to you. Unless you want to read the chat yourself. Just let me know how you want to do it.
Yeah, it would be great if you can follow the chat.
Yes.
And please interrupt me whenever there's anything coming up that's like something that might make sense to ask immediately. Yeah. I don't really mind. I have 50 slides here.
Okay.
So, yeah, let's not leave everything after the slides.
Absolutely. No, we will do like this. It worked very well. So, okay. Please.
I will take it over. Yes. So sharing the screen here. Going into presentation mode. So welcome everybody. The topic today that I basically created this presentation on is I wanted to talk about how to minimize risks when going into games business, thinking about in the angle of an entrepreneur tackling problems. I think these issues are relatable for anybody working in the industry, because you also, it's great to know what kind of like risks really matter and what don't, because there's certain aspects in the industry that I think everybody should know, and this is definitely it, because if you're still working in a company in the games business, these will be relevant, and you can use this knowledge anywhere you go, really. So let's kick it off by an introduction on myself. So I'm Joachim Akren. I'm the founder and CEO of Elite Game Developers, which is a company that helps gaming entrepreneurs so that they would thrive in building their games companies, so that they wouldn't have to go through all the failures, all these kind of unnecessary mistakes that, for example, I started in 2005 when I started my first games company, Iron Star. I did everything wrong, really, every possible aspect. I'm going to talk about a lot of them today. And then later on, when we founded Next Games, which was the second company that I built, there was similar issues, but maybe kind of like the learnings that I learned, I didn't do the same mistakes, but there were more mistakes to uncover when you do a follow-up company. So we'll go to those today. So my activities nowadays is that Elite Game Developers has a podcast. There's 60 episodes. You can find it on Spotify and iTunes, wherever, with the name Elite Game Developers. So there's a lot of cool founder, entrepreneur interviews, investor interviews from Finland, from the Nordics, Europe, US, global people talking about like all their learnings in games business. And then I'm writing a blog as well. There's an article every week coming out. Like for instance, last week I put out an article about how to put out structure a stock option program for your startup, and what does it look like for instance, when you raise money from investors, that because they take a percentage of your company, how you can like model that out into the future. If you need to raise more money, how much will you own of the company later down the line, and your co-founders and everything. There's a lot of details there. It's also, all of these can be found on elitegamedevelopers.com if you go there. And then recently I came out with a book called Long-Term Game, How to Build a Games Company. You can find it on Amazon. There's an audio book version coming out in the next few weeks, so look out for that one. And there's online courses. I have a few free ones and a premium course that I launched recently on pitching your games company to investors. What are the tactics? What kind of like pitch decks you can use? What kind of discussions you want to have with investors when you move forward there? So there's a lot of things that I learned that I didn't know early on when I started in 2005. I definitely didn't know what is actually like raising money from investors. But yeah, like on my background, I mentioned that I had a games company, Iron Star Helsinki, 2005. We built virtual worlds for Nokia mobile phones, which was the most stupid idea, but very innovative in a sense that now you have places like Fortnite that you can visit on your mobile phone. And this was kind of the dream back then, but the devices just didn't make sense. You couldn't have, for instance, there was no internet connection on your phones in 2005, really. You had 2G and something really crappy. And most of the people didn't have data plans. So that company struggled for a long time. We eventually started making money when we moved to make Facebook games in 2009. And we were profitable for a while until Facebook closed down all the viral channels, those news feed, request a friend things. And we didn't get any money from investors anymore. So we closed down. I went to Supercell. That was the days when there was like 20 people at Supercell before Clash of Clans and Heyday. I was there for over a year. And when I saw this kind of rocket ship and the opportunity that mobile games really had in 2012, I left to think about the next company, and I came up with Next Games. I found 4 other people to found a company, and it's now, I think, 120 people at the moment. There's a Stranger Things game coming out soon, which looks really good. I left to do something else because I felt that I want to give back to entrepreneurs. I really love to help people. In a sense, I feel like I've done enough games for a while now. I wanted to do something else where I can do alone something that is more like leveling up a lot of people in what they're trying. So talking about today's lecture, I think one of those things that often doesn't get talked about in startups is how do you become profitable as a company, meaning that you're paying everybody's salaries and there's some money still left in the bank for investing into future ideas, like maybe hiring somebody more into the company. Like being in this kind of spot is, I think, something that everybody should strive to get into, that they wouldn't, you wouldn't be stuck in this kind of like hamster wheel of, hey, we need to get some Business Finland money, maybe we need to get some more investor money because the game is taking forever to get ready. But I'm pushing everybody to put the game out as soon as possible and learn and move on. But like there's a lot of risks that I think a lot of people don't really realize before they start. So when you want to have a profitable game, like how do you actually minimize all the risks that are going on? Well, a profitable game means that the game development has so many dead end roads, really. You try out the game, see if anybody loves it. They didn't love it. That's a dead end. You start developing, it takes forever. It's a dead end as well. So it's kind of like there's a lot of these stories in the game industry. Like recently, there's this Turku-based company who did a lot of cool games, like an Alien game, and they had a lot of IP. There was a press in Helsinki Sanomat all over the place about that. They were talking about this kind of like path that they went down, and so their story kind of like reflects really well the kind of where you have a lot of risks, but it still looked like a path that we should go down anyways. So what is really risky? I think it's always for game companies, the biggest risk is to build a big game, meaning like you need to build a lot of technology to actually do it. You need to have a lot of people building it, like a big game team. It's going to take years. It's going to take a lot of money. So, but then you have kind of like at the other end of the spectrum, you now have hyper casual games. I don't know if you guys have talked about this genre. There's a lot of people here who worked in the game industry. So I'll quickly kind of like encapsulate what is hyper casual. It's a genre where there are games that could be developed in 2 weeks and then they're out in the store already. That's a business model that doesn't lock you down for 2 years to make an MMO, like something crazy. But both of them have similar failure risks, that people just don't like your hyper casual game. People don't like your MMO. Like why? There's a lot of startups that go after immediately the big game. But I'm also always pointing out to people, like if you're beginning now your own company building, there's so many moving parts. Why wouldn't you start with something small? And then there's the idle genre is something that has been around for a few years now as a proven stomping ground for early stage companies to actually figure out that, hey, we can start making money pretty quickly with this kind of game, where it's all about people, players going in, starting some kind of like a coffee shop here, maybe a trailer park, other kind of like ways. There's the idle miner tycoon there, where the developers don't really put that much effort into the game and then already see it work. So it's populated with people.
There is the question now, if I can interrupt.
Yes, do it.
Always asking, how long typically is the time frame the investors allow to game development company before the game starts generating revenue or even turns into profitable?
Yeah, I think that's always you can't really, the investor doesn't like ask and then you say, but it's more always like a discussion. Like the developer needs to have a plan in place, like a business plan for, like, this is what we're building, this is how many people we're gonna need, this is when we're gonna launch, this is when we see revenue. Like that's I think, and this is where we start seeing profitability, because then you can, build out the timeline that this is how long it's going to take, and this is how many people are going to be working there, this is how much marketing spend we're going to do here when we try to get to profitability, and then you break that down into a sum of money, and then you say, this is what we need. And then the investor might say, like, thanks for the number, I think this is too big for us, you should talk to these people and these people, like other investors who are, happy to invest in that sector. And it's also thinking about, like, you should do your research as well on investors. It's very beneficial to ask around other entrepreneurs about, hey, how much have you raised? What was kind of like the plan there? Was it that you raised for one game, or did you raise for 3 games, that you're going to have enough money in the bank to try out 3 different ideas? I think it's kind of like, how many swings at the bat do you get with your money? That kind of like mentality is useful as well. So I would say it's not like a black and white question that the investor will ask how much. That will never happen. It's more about a fluid discussion where both sides know what they're getting into. Hopefully that answers. All right, moving on. So idle genre. The cool thing about the idle genre is that it's populated by people who know what they're doing. They're going there with a game idea that they don't want to risk the whole company on one idea. They try out something that might work and then see how it goes. There's companies like Future Play in Helsinki who did a lot of cool things there. They had these farm away games. I think they rebranded it to something like Idle Farm Tycoon or something. But they started with the idle genre games because they were easy to develop. they have really great engagement numbers usually. I think it's more crowded nowadays. But anyways, then you have East Side Games from Vancouver who created Trailer Park Boys. They saw profitability really early. And Starberry Games in Berlin, who is founded by Antti Hattara, Finnish guy. They also went after the idle genre after trying out a lot of instant game stuff. And this was the way that they got into, hey, we're actually profitable now. This is the lowest risk possibility that you could go after, because I think starting off with something easy is always great. Because, why is this also so cool? Because I think big games companies don't really consider idle genre as real games. They say that we're not going to do an idle game because that's not something that the other big guys are doing. So they're looking at this genre as like, we're not going to go there. So you have an opportunity to take over spaces where other people just aren't. And I think that is the bigger opportunity to all startups out there. So I had Tim Reiter from Colibri. He's one of the co-founders who Colibri created the Idle Miner Tycoon. So he told me in this interview in my podcast that they were first building like a Boom Beach game, actually, with animals or something. With Boom Beach is the game from Supercell. And what that means is you need to build a lot of technology to provide like this kind of multiplayer experience, the clan experience, alliances, all the matchmaking, everything. It's a bigger endeavor. And they tried that for like half a year and they were stuck because it just didn't feel right. And then they scrapped that game and then figured out this idle genre. I think there was Adventure Capitalist was one of the first big idle genre games, and they thought about the genre. It seemed something that made sense for them. They had the idea from a Commodore 64 game, from like a miner game, that what would it look like in the kind of like modern times as a idle clicker game. And they built it up in I think 2 months, and it was ready for friends to try out. And they still put maybe 1 month or a bit over time into the game, and it was out in the App Store in 3 months. And then the company was profitable. I think they made another game called Idle Factory Tycoon like several years later, but the company was making tens of millions with this one simple game, not a real game in a sense, with very, very little effort down the line. They just figured that this is an opportunity that we need to go after, and it has the least risk. And that was paying off really well for them. Last year, I think Ubisoft bought them. No, early this year, they bought them with like 400 million. So it's a very happy story where they didn't risk things early on. So I want to talk today about these 10 risks that I've identified that startups in gaming can really like fail, and bigger companies fail from these as well. It's no excuse to have a big company and then not fail because of these. So I'll start off with not having a mission defined for your company. So I define this as like kind of like, why does the company exist is the big question that you should ask. So what is the purpose of your games company? Why does the world need it? Can you explain that? So, and like, if your mission would be to, or your purpose to have the company would just be to make money, like how would that feel as a like thing that you communicate? Or something like, I've heard this a couple of times from entrepreneurs saying that, I'll just make this company now, and we're gonna ship this game, and I'm not gonna spend too much time in this company. And that was like, whoa, like, what is this story? That they're kind of like already past the idea that usually these things take a lot longer than 4 years. It's a 10-year project to get to success with a company. So you need to think about the kind of why question a lot more. And how are you changing things for people for the good when you succeed with your mission? Are you creating kind of value for other players, people in your company? are you changing the way that gaming is? So what is your why is the big question. I think when you start to see something come up that makes really like sense for you and the other founders, then you can push it down inside the company to your employees and then towards your players to also like put out the manifesto that this is why our company exists. And then you start seeing like more of these, like you can answer questions like, why am I showing up to work every morning? Like, what is driving me to do this? Why am I playing these games? So it cannot be just financial rewards. That is kind of like a side product of a great mission. So go after these kind of pointers and figure it out. I love this one guy called Simon Sinek who has this book called Start with Why, and there's Infinite Game is his latest book where he talks more about this, that the great company is not trying to win, but they're trying to stay in the game, that they're pushing things forward. I think one of the best examples now in gaming is Epic Games, who have Fortnite. It's great, but they're pushing the boundaries with things like these kind of virtual concerts. Like they had Marshmello, and now they had Travis Scott there performing. Like, what is that? That's like the most interesting virtual world experience where you're pushing people to have these kind of concert experiences with your avatar in the world. Like now all the musicians are at home because of coronavirus and they're doing Zoom concerts, but that's boring. Think about like Fortnite concert. Like that's the optimal place when the world is shifting towards a more digital experience for entertainment in all the facets. So yeah, just one of the examples. There's a lot nice ones out there. So risk number 2 goes into hiring. Hiring people, you can do it in so many wrong ways. I've done it in so many wrong ways. Like I would say a lot of companies who get a lot of money, you raise 10 million from investors. What usually happens is that you start hiring marketing people very early before you know if you have a game that works. But then you also get into this hiring too late mode where you might have a game that is working already, and then you don't have anybody to look at the analytics. So the top tips for hiring, what I would say is that get people who are ready to wear several hats. When I'm talking to startup founders who are like interviewing somebody who could be a chief operations officer or a product officer, or so like a management person who would be the kind of like founding teams, kind of like the people who are going to be running the company for the foreseeable future. So ask them if they're happy to do other stuff than just the role that they were hired for. In a startup, that is what you're anyways going to be needed to do. Like if you're kind of like frowning that, hey, I wasn't hired for this, then this person shouldn't be in a startup. And also like these kind of pointers that I've seen a lot in my career is that you have a programmer, for instance, who's kind of like waiting for the game design to be handed over to him, maybe in Jira tickets or, hey, where's the design document? But I think it's more about, in a startup, everybody should be involved in designing the game. It's everybody's responsibility. Everybody needs to have a say and like take ownership of aspects of the game. Of course, there should be somebody who is the kind of like the vision holder and the owner, but everybody needs to be involved. And at least you should hire people who think like that they're happy to be involved in all the aspects. And also this kind of like thing that when the technology is maybe a challenge, I think it's more about everybody should be responsible in the company to kind of like think about these issues early on and research what's going on. And final tip here for hiring in a startup is that you want people who are able to grow and who have the willingness to go the mile and grow to become leaders later when the company grows. that if there are more or less people who aren't, having appetite for that, it's also a bit of a bad one. So ask these two questions. Are you ready to wear several hats, and do you want to become a leader? You don't need to be a big leader now because we're only 6 people, in a startup. But then when we're 60 people, it's going to be a different challenge already. We're going to support you, but we want you to take the role of growing into a leader. So then hiring the wrong people, did that a couple of times for sure. So you won't be able to change people you hire. I think this is like, personalities are super hard to switch. If you hire somebody and you think that, okay, they said something that doesn't really fit us, well, maybe they'll just, start learning how to be with the group better. But I think it's more about they change you in these aspects where you start kind of like slipping and allowing certain behavior in the company. So, if you end up hiring these kind of brilliant jerks or prophets of rage, I've seen this a few times, and unfortunately also bumped into the situation where we didn't do anything for, half a year or a year, and it's so bad. So if you want to go to a certain cultural direction, all your new hires will be really good for that. So just like interviewing somebody and seeing that they're really good at talking, but it feels like there's, some aspects of their approach with people where they're a bit like closed, or maybe they're a bit arrogant. You can go towards a more arrogant culture if you want by hiring people like that. So the third point, the third risk is fundraising, getting enough money to start operating. So raising money is not being able to raise the biggest problem. This is like I was just yesterday having a call with a company in Helsinki who I've been helping out for a year, a games company who have raised some money, but they would now want to raise a bigger amount to actually like starting to work for a year without worrying about money. And I asked them like, what is the problem that why aren't they getting money? And they were like, I don't know, we just need the money, and why can't they give it to us? So they were sort of like, feeling that they're the people who are hurting and they should be understood. But I think that's usually not the big problem. I think few things here that are going down. So you have money, then you bump into more problems. The investors might be reading that you don't actually know yet where you're going when you raise the money. What is going to actually happen next with your company? Like how do you have the team already in place? Because if you raise money, that money anyways should be going into solving, like, how do you go to the next level versus staying at the same level where you are right now. And another problem here usually is that people raise money from the wrong people. Like there's a lot of money out there. There's thousands of investors in Europe who invest in technology startups. But there's only a few % of those people who have actually done gaming investments, and then an even smaller portion of investors who have worked in games companies before they started investing. And I think it's always beneficial to identify those people who have worked in gaming and create a strategic approach to those people once you have proven that your pitch and your investor story is really interesting. So don't go for those people first, but rather ask those people who are close to technology and who are investing, but don't take money from them if you can choose people who know gaming. And there's
Joachim, we have one question actually concerning the previous points.
Yes.
Why should talents come to your company if you only pay monthly salary and not equity?
Yes, that's a good question. I think there's always the mission that should be something that you're attracting people towards, that you're doing something different. There are interesting people at your company that the talent can learn from. I think those two. So interesting people to work with, interesting business idea, the mission and vision for the company, to do something very challenging versus something that everybody else is already doing. And if you cannot, can you repeat the question? Was it that they can't offer equity?
Well, I think the question was from the perspective of employee. So why should talents come to your company if you only pay a monthly salary and not equity? I think the Maui wonders if there is an offer with no equity, what are the founders thinking? Why would a person join?
Yeah, I think it's a balance between asking the talent, do they want a market salary, or do they want a lower salary and some equity? I think that's the way to frame sort of like when somebody is joining, that what is their kind of appetite towards like incentives? Are they seeing some short-term rewards more important, like a monthly salary, versus long-term? Maybe in 10 years they get a lot of money because they had stock options. So it depends.
Yeah, I would also say it's like it depends at which stage of the company development the person wants to join. If it's early stages, then an equity is more often on the table. But if the company is already well developed and advanced, then equity, at least to my understanding, is much less even available as an option. So then it's, but obviously then it would be the highest salary.
Yes.
Which is not a bad thing either.
Yeah, of course.
There is also the other question: what type of risks comes with raising money from the wrong sources?
Yeah, good question. I think you can lose control of, like, if you raise a lot of money from somebody who doesn't know gaming, they, at the first sign of some problems in your company, they might want to jump in and start like helping you, air quotes, giving kind of advice, maybe bringing in a friend who is a business person who maybe knows what they should be doing. Maybe they have worked at a technology startup, never in gaming. They come in, things become very problematic. You don't really want to give out too much equity for investors who don't know gaming, because you will have problems. Everybody has problems. It's never a straight line to success. But if you have people who can balance out kind of like understanding of what it takes to make a games company versus somebody who doesn't, you're gonna be having investors who can back you, and then the investors who can like really screw things over. Hopefully that answers.
I think it does. Christina, is it okay? Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
All right, I'll continue. So yeah, I think that answers also the too much too soon angle, that you raise maybe too much money before you've proven your idea. I think this is also something that savvy investors won't want to join too early if the idea isn't proven at all. So go and prove it on your own first, and then raise money. So also this thing that happens a lot in gaming, that you get some money and you're sort of like, the pressure eases immediately. You maybe take a more bigger salary because you got the money in the bank. You like, it upgrades your lifestyle from being the entrepreneur who couldn't take a salary to somebody who can suddenly, and it really changes the mindset. It's a lifestyle upgrade. So there was I won't say the name of the person who was talking about this. This was a founder who was a long time founder. Like he said that when we were more on the funding path, meaning that taking money from investors or took already money, we were much less disciplined with our finances and a lot more of the other details of the business. So when you have raised money, you aren't comparing yourself to profitable companies who aren't raising, but you're rather like comparing to everybody else who has already raised and following that kind of like road because you want to pay everybody a healthy salary versus paying the salary from the games, the money that comes from the games. So
There is one question now on a general level. What are
yeah,
the main differences between a game company and another tech startup in managerial perspective?
which one, which perspective?
Uh, well, Nazil is asking from the managerial point of view. I guess the question is, what is the difference in managing a game company and any other tech startup company?
I'm actually been contemplating this question a couple of times myself, and I think it's not that different. It's a consumer business that you're getting into with gaming. So I think that's the biggest difference. If you're selling to businesses, like to enterprise software, I think there is the biggest difference versus something that you're going after consumers. Because in the business sector, you're selling to few people and you need to have a sales team, like few companies that you're selling to, and you can already be profitable. But when you go into building a consumer startup, which is gaming, then you're approaching thousands and millions of users or customers. And you need to have a totally different approach for product to distribution to monetization and also hiring. So I think that's the key difference there. But both, aren't easy. Nothing's easy.
There is okay. The Nazil clarifies. I mean, what kind of mistakes can investors who do not know gaming industry make?
Yes, that's a great point. A lot of people, a lot of investors who have, like in the history of, there's have been games for 40 years. I think a lot of people have come out of like, putting money into games companies that then failed and went to bankruptcy. And they say that gaming is a hit-driven business. But what I think more about nowadays is that you need to learn that it is a hit-driven business, but how many tries can you put into a company to actually get into having that hit? And how do you minimize the risks involved of blocking you from doing a hit game? Like what kind of understanding you need to have. And I think investors and entrepreneurs should be sort of like, or they are on the best investors are, thinking about these things with the entrepreneurs. They're sort of like in the same mindset. They know what a good game is all about. It's about a lot of things. Games are really complex. You have player motivations, like player goals, emotions, good controls, good UX, UI. It's a bunch of things. And also like competition in the market versus like you have a cool game, but there's already somebody out there who is paying more marketing dollars to buy all the users. So the great investors know what they're getting into. And it's not only a hit-driven business. All businesses are hit-driven in a sense, in consumer especially.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So one point here still about the lifestyle upgrade. I think it's a better approach to always, at least for the founders, to live in this kind of feeling that money is scarce, so that you're always spending less. You're not taking a healthy, like, you're taking as much salary as you need to kind of like survive. Let's put it this way. You're not taking an expensive vacation, you don't do that anymore until your startup is, very profitable. Because I think investors will also want to see that you're putting your effort into the company. Of course, you need to take a break once in a while. That's totally fine. You need to take a vacation once in a while, but don't put your money there, but rather spend it into hiring more people, more talented people, figuring out how quickly can you get the games out to see success with your product. So do you need to raise money? So I think the biggest issue that happens there when you raise is you lose percentage of your company, like a stake in the company goes to the investor, and they will never go away. They'll stay there until the end. So you need to justify that there will be lasting growth from the money that you raise. It's not only for, hey, let's get this, demo to be in the development and not real figure out that, oh shit, we're going to be needing to raise more money before we get the game out. It's always rather go one really like big milestone before you need to think about raising more money. So also think about this a bit now. If you're just starting a games company, like, can you do it as this kind of side hustle project for a long time, that you're still in your current job, take a really nice salary, try to work on it on your like pastime, maybe on the weekends, get something going, maybe a prototype, and race with that prototype, because it's more likely that you're already proving something because you can already try a prototype. There's some people who already see that there's something cool there in the prototype. So go at least that kind of length there.
And there is one question from Solid. She's asking, overall, the strategies and risks factors sounds identical to lean approach B2C startups. Am I understanding it correctly? But would this be applicable in other platforms, for example, console and arcade games?
Yes, I think it is, because you're still, building a technology company that will require a lot of money. If you're doing a console project, it requires funding, most likely. Otherwise, you're going to be working on it for 20 years. So I think it's a tough call. I would say you need to think about all of these things that I now have here in this slide deck. The risks are still the same. The real difference from mobile to console, I would say you get more data driven through mobile, because you can have these soft launches, get metrics early on. In console, how do you actually get creative and start getting data early on? Like how about you first launch a version of your console game on the mobile? Maybe do it in a way that the source code that you have for the game is actually something that you're anyways going to use for the console version. Why not try it on mobile first to see if people are interested in playing this game? Getting it to people's hands is the best risk mitigation that you can do for a games company.
Yep.
Hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah. The risk number 4, I think, is the scale of the game. So the game is too big. We talked about this already. So the bar is very high when you go into making a complex game. Like I was talking about the Colibri example of them building a Boom Beach clone. So we actually had that at Next Games as well, where we were going after mid-core, which is, you have Clash of Clans, Empires and Puzzles. There's big games out there which have really proven core gameplay, meta gameplay, but the bar is so high because you need to start putting in a lot of these social features like clans, clan wars, clan alliance quests, whatnot. It's like crazy. So suddenly you're looking at a 2-year project, and I think that is one of the biggest risks. So that's again going and pointing out why idle games and hyper casual are so great for startups, to find success there and graduate afterwards to bigger games. where it's more risky that everything will fail, but rather like, wouldn't you like want to be in the position where you can take a salary and then hire more people to take over these games that are making money, and you can focus with your team on the bigger risky game where you're not betting the whole company on this big game?
There is one question.
Yeah.
What is the best way to get feedbacks from players when you are a startup with no data available? Do you use beta versions? Do you market a new game?
What was the, was it like, can you repeat?
So,
Sorry.
what is the best way to get feedbacks from players
Yeah.
when you're a startup with no data available? Do you use beta versions, or how do you market a new game?
Yes.
Basically, when you have no data,
Yeah.
how do you know what is the feedback from the players?
Yes. Well, can you get into the position where you can start getting data? Like, do you need to have a fully fledged game ready? Can you just create a core gameplay? Like, what you guys probably know what core gameplay is. It's the second to second gameplay where you're doing some action or something. Can you build that and soft launch that on mobile to get it into hands of players? That's one way to start kind of like piece by piece understanding how the player is interacting with the game. Like, of course, you're thinking like, hey, we need all these levels, like this crazy huge thing before it's working. Well, maybe you do need more content, but then you can constantly, uh, you have the game out already, people are playing it, you start adding stuff on top, and then releasing a new version into the App Store or Google Play, and then you always see how people react to the new stuff that you put in, and then you're putting in more and more, and the game is starting to shape up into having a lot more like stuff inside, and you're constantly measuring what is going on with the game. How good is it at this stage? And if things aren't moving towards better numbers, then it might be already that, hey, what are the underlying reasons here that people don't like it? And you can put some surveys inside your games. There's a lot of cool ways in Unity, for instance, that you can embed like web URLs to a Survey Monkey survey where you ask people what they like, what they don't like, ask about like where do they feel that they don't want to come back anymore and things like that. So, and if you're at that stage that just isn't an option, then one way is to start doing play tests, invite people over, or now when everybody is at home, just send them the build in one way or another that they can install it on their machine or something, and then do a Zoom call, like a screen share, and like you hear them playing it, how they feel about it. Start doing that constantly. I think you have to have that feedback. You cannot work in your dark room on the game for months and months without any feedback.
Thank you. I think there is a follow-up question
Yes.
from Mika. You're emphasizing the importance of quick getting real world of getting the real world data quick to ensure the core loops and meta layer is solid, and also taking a smaller risk by not competing against games which have proven loops and meta. This makes sense, but how much the weight of this can be mitigated with proven and experienced development team early on?
A lot, for sure. You need to, if you have experience from making games, you can spot problems early on, like where people can have issues. Was there another question there? I need to...
Yes. How would you advise game entrepreneurs who want to build content-driven games, like narrative-focused game, might have simple generic core game mechanics, so won't me much wow in a in the early phase, but focus more on quality visuals, stories, community, etc., which would require long-term demonstration.
Yeah, it's also a good idea to think about your project in a way that before you choose your idea, that this is what we want to do, kind of break down what it looks like when you're going to have available testing with a build that you can send to people. Like if that takes for like years, or like if you're willing to do that, I think it's all like, of course, fine. But like, can you somehow find ways for the idea to be chopped into smaller pieces? Maybe you don't have graphics, you only have text. People are experiencing your narrative already through some kind of text interface. Can you build that very quickly? Maybe you don't even use, fancy Unity, but you use some other tool that is kind of some no-code tool. There's a lot of things out there nowadays. You can just build it in HTML maybe. But the experience that you're going after, like how long will it take to actually achieve something that is really quick and dirty, but it still provides the narrative? If you're going after a narrative game, I think this is one of the core places that you should try it out. That is, what is the minimum that we can build?
Thank you. No more questions so far.
Yep. So risk number 5, not being a learning machine. So what does this mean? There's, I think, two distinct things that I've seen a lot in game industry from my 15 years career, is that the game industry is full of people with fixed mindsets. What does that mean? Well, they're walking around there saying, we know everything we need to know about making games. Like the fixed mindset agrees with this kind of statement that I have a certain amount of intelligence and I'm using it constantly. They're proud of what they do, and they don't really want to point out mistakes that they've done regarding designing games. So I think it's very important to kind of like go into and think about this a bit. Like, do you understand why certain games are doing well on the top charts? Why are they working? So what are the underlying reasons for, Clash Royale to be making so much money for Supercell? Like, why are people still playing the game? Why, although it's like close to 5 years old already, and Clash of Clans, that's I think 8 years old game already. Why is that? And figuring those out, there's a bunch of games that are really old games, and I think that's a really interesting thing to dive deep into and start learning. But that the fixed mindset doesn't really want to do that. And they're saying also that hyper casual games aren't real games, and these kind of pointers like, we don't want to make these games because they're not real games. But then you have the growth mindset. You want to learn. You're kind of like living in this world where you know that if you learn more, you can do better. So it's an advantage for yourself. So the growth mindset agrees with the statement of learning can significantly enhance my intelligence. So before I move to the next, I think one of those things here is that, if you're playing a lot of mobile games, you want to be picking up stuff that can, in a sense, kill the knowledge that you had previously, that you're kind of like enriching things that you taught earlier were the truth, the wisdom, but there's constantly more evidence coming up that you could utilize in the way that you see how you can make better games. But there is a lot of people who think that what they know already is good enough. So I think this is one of the risks. You can go after games by doing the game that you love, but do you really know everything that you need to know about the game that you love to make it a success or not? So that's a big risk. Under like this kind of unrealistic expectations, this is a big risk that comes up a lot, especially when you start to kind of like have some success with your games. well, one of the statements here is that we will create the game and people will just arrive. Like there's a lot of things that can happen and go wrong with just making a game and just putting it live. Like you just don't know how to distribute it. Maybe other developers are already catering to the players. So how do you avoid these kind of traps where you don't know that there's a problem? And maybe there's people in your team who might be thinking that, oh shit, we haven't talked about marketing yet at all. Well, we're making the game now. We don't have time to think about the marketing. And then this person is just, silenced in a sense. I've seen this happen so many times in my career where somebody had something in mind which felt like, hey, we're not doing things the right way right now. So how do you avoid that? I think building teams that encourage bad news to be revealed, that you're constantly pointing out to people that, hey, we really want to know if there's something that we should look into now, and please point it out and we'll definitely do that. So ask your team members, what are the problems that we have? And when you find a problem, you should really do this kind of root cause analysis around the problem, why it is there, and figure out what caused it, especially in these kind of moments that you're not thinking about marketing. So why are you not doing that? That is a problem for sure. So addressing it is really important rather than playing a blame game there where you're pointing fingers or stuff like that. And it's really important to show the supportiveness and repeatedly talking about that you want to discover bad news and you want to have this kind of paranoia about making games, making companies, because through the paranoia you're not relying on luck, which is difficult to rely on. And I think it needs to be genuine, this kind of like curiosity coming up from people who are leading the teams towards like the people who are more or less like hired to work, but they're still like putting a lot of effort and caring. So if you show the curiosity, they will also voice the problems more easily. Risk number 7 is publishing, like publishers in gaming. So I think big question is like, do you self-publish or do you find a publisher? What are the risks here? So a couple of things I advise early stage companies to do is not to hire marketing or analytics people, because that's going to cost you a lot of money for first reason. The second reason is that you can go after a publisher deal when you have confidence through all the playtesting that you can do, all the test launches, the soft launches of the games, collecting a lot of data if you're going into the right direction with your game or not. And like not worrying too much about, okay, we need to ship the game in 6 months. We just work on the game now. But rather like focus on figuring out if the game is going to be actually like a really big miss here when we get into the 6 months time, that nobody's going to want to publish this game anyways. So focus on building a team that can have and build confidence for the game. So what does this confidence look like? So you're developing the game for 2 months and you place test it yourself, you do internal tests, external tests, and once you feel a lot of confidence for the game. So this is very mobile specific, but I think everybody should learn this, even if you're working on console, PC, whatever. You can use the same data-driven approach to improve your games before you put like a year of your life into building something that might not even work. So I think one of the things is once you do enough playtesting, you move on to a build where you can measure how long players are playing, session time, and day one retention testing, which is the term that do people come back to the game after they played it from the install day to the following day. Just a sip. So session time and day one. Why are these important? So this is from a Google Play report that they show that the trends really point out that the longer people spend in the game on the first day, the installation day, day zero, the more likely they are to return on day one, which is the following day after installing the game. So you can see here on the curve that the higher, the longer the y-axis is. So if you're playing for 40 minutes on the installation day, day zero, you are at least about 50% likely to come back on day one, which is really, really healthy game already. It's something that all the big companies would want, that kind of a game. So it correlates really nicely. And then they shared in this Google Play report that they can put games that are on Google Play into 4 different groups, and how these games work. That the higher the day zero minutes played, that it really correlates nicely with all of these different games, that the best-selling games see a 250% growth in retention from the first minute played to the 10th minute. That if you reach 10 minutes of gameplay, this is average, summed up time that players played divided by the number of players. So you get an average total session time for the install day. You can guarantee that it's going to be a really nice return for the following day. And then you can use data for other things here as well, looking at like how many minutes they played on the day and how likely it was for them to come back. This is from another example where there's something wrong in the tutorial, in the first time user experience. Many players don't want to come back if they get to experience this part of the game. So you can fix the game, and you can increase that there's more people who are getting to 10 minutes of the game in a better tutorial. And then you suddenly see that, oh, my retention day one is increasing because more people are having a better experience early on in the game. So there's one really good blog post that I recommend to everybody. Is this blog post from Tampere-based company Traplight. They talk a lot about their KPI, key performance indicator driven development. You should check it out. They really highlight how they approached different beta versions of their game, what features they added in each beta version, what were the goals to get day one retention up, or to have a better day three divided by day one ratio, which then shows that players are staying, several days, weeks. It's a good indicator of are they leaving or not. You should definitely look at this blog post. You can find it on the Traplight blog if you want. So worrying about not having a publisher, is it a worry? One of the worries that usually people have is that we don't have a user acquisition marketing expert who can buy installs for our game. Well, one of the things that I always encourage people here is that why don't you just go to YouTube and look up how to run Facebook ads for app installs. It's not rocket science, really. And worried about analytics, well, you only really need these early metrics to prove your game. You don't need like crazy like monetization metrics. You just want to look at people playing the game happily. Monetization is a happy problem later if you first figure out that people really want to play your game. And ask your local developer community to help set the analytics up if you have problems with the analytics technology. And you can use YouTube for this as well. So should you ever have a publisher? I think this is the confidence from having a really good understanding that this game is working. Then you can get the best publisher deal ever. And you should, I think it's the benefit for the developer to actually go this route, that they first figure out the game on their own and then they go to the publishers. Because like with the best game, it's still like, why should you still want to have a publisher? I think I always think about this kind of thing, that then you need the money to start marketing a really cool game, because you don't want it to stay as a small thing, because a competitor might come and just copy your game and take over the market. So it's good to have a bigger company like a publisher helping you on marketing. And they also help you to understand the game in more ways, because they see a lot of things happening in the market that small startups just don't have the time to analyze. So risk number 8, changes in the market. What is this? So let's think about the Archero hype. There's this game that came out last year called Archero, which is a really cool mobile game where you have a archer character who is going through levels and shooting bad like enemy characters. It was really a big hit because it was a simple game, simple meta game. Everything was nice and it really worked really nicely. But there was a lot of other people who started making Archero type of games last year. And I think the problem there is that you go into this kind of crowded market where you're thinking that, hey, we're going to be, making an Archero kind of game and it's going to work. But I would say there's 100 other developers who are thinking about the same thing, and most of them will be even faster to get it out. And suddenly you have a market where there's 50 Archero kind of games. So how many games can you actually have in a market who are targeting the same customer needs in a way? So let's think about the battle royale genre, where there's a lot of games. I think the most notable one is Brawl Stars. They were one of the first to capture this market, but then Future Play came out with Badlands Royale. Then there's this game called Armajet, and last year Zuba, and everybody's trying to get the same players. So a lot of user acquisition money is being spent to acquire these users. And it's in a sense like, you know who is making money here. It's Facebook and Google from the ads that these people buy. So you don't want to be a developer in this kind of like area. We actually, yeah, go for it.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Was an article for this course, which author argues that products brought to market from premium business models will have lower user rates than products brought to market from premium business models. So, always asking, based on your experience, do you agree?
I don't know what I should read the article probably to understand what it means. Premium business models.
Yeah, so products which were brought to the market from freemium business models will have lower rates than products brought to market through premium business models. So freemium is either free to play or premium model. So which one will be, according to your experience, which will have, lower use rates?
Yeah, I think the premium model can work. It's not a problem. I think it's more about, do you have the most engaging game? It's not like, can you get the game into people's hands and they can start playing with it, and they just can't, let go of the game because it's so good. And then comes the monetization, which makes more sense for your product. If it is a narrative-based game, then the premium model most likely works better. Of course, you can think about battle passes and for systems like that. So it's not really like clear. It depends so much on what you want to achieve, really. Like, do you want to cater an audience that is more familiar with paying up front, or that your audience is already like ready for freemium?
I think that was also what other lecturers were saying, that the type of the game, that what is defining which model you should choose for it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. So we had similar issues at Next Games. We were making a game called Compass Point West in 2013 and 14, And when we soft launched it, the genre of building a city and then battling other players' cities was very, very crowded. And user acquisition costs were super high. I think that was a big lesson for us, that there needs to be some sort of edge if we're going into a market where there's a lot of people already. We thankfully did a really different approach with the Walking Dead game, which was a turn-based tactical strategy game where there wasn't similar games out in the market, and that really helped us propel the company. And that game is still now making a decent money every month. Then going to risk number 9, game designer risks. What is this? So I've always categorized designers having these kind of two areas where they are really, it's great to see them take over both areas, but I usually see that they're either good in systems or that they're really good at core gameplay design. Meaning with systems that they can build a meta game, a game economy, model things in Excel spreadsheets really nicely, and think about that as a game in a sense. And then you have core designers who are more looking at, like action parts of the game. Like there's, you drop a unit in Clash of Clans or Clash Royale. You drop a unit and the unit starts moving, and then the enemy drops a unit. And what makes that interesting is what the core designer is thinking about. And I think that's the distinction here, that you have a lot of game designers that, you might need a designer for your games company, and you start recruiting, and you need to spot which sort of like category does the designer go into, because you need both. But I think you definitely don't want to have only system designers. So also, I think it's one of those things that you have a risk there when you're hiring designer who will take care of free to play. Like I always ask people, why doesn't your whole team, put in the time to understand free to play? It is not a difficult thing to start thinking about like how these games work, because it's so much like it's everywhere. It's more or less like one of those things that are coming up everywhere in the game industry nowadays. So like then the final risk here that I want to point out is the coder and artist risk. This is a thing that comes up a lot in gaming, is when you're creating a game with a really, like, you're in a hurry, you need to code the game, but the source code that you're developing is not the best quality. It's spaghetti code or some other pasta kind of format. So you start accumulating technical debt. So how do you create kind of like a game where or a culture in your team where this is not acceptable, that people need to create bad code and live with it later on? Because a lot of programmers I remember in like my career seeing a lot of programmers really worry about this, that when the code quality isn't great because we're doing it in such a hurry. So you should think about building a culture in your team where this is addressed early on, like thinking about that, can the technical debt be something that you worry once you have, the session time and day one metrics really well. Then you're like, oh, we're in a happy situation now, let's take a time off and fix these things before we launch the game fully. And for the artist, there's like, if things are moving slowly, what can the artists really do? I think there's this emerging thing in gaming, which is called user acquisition tests, or CPI tests, where you create a fake app store page and you create like fake images and an icon to see how likely it is that people would click on the install button. So you can put your artists to actually like figure out what is the best artwork to deliver the most clicks. Like it might sound like something like, why would we ever want to do that in gaming? Because it feels so exploitive or something. But you want to think about this as a business where you want to make money to pay salaries. That is already very difficult, I would say. Like how many games companies get formed every year, and how many of them ever manage to pay salaries consistently? It's so small. Like, you want to take advantage of all of these like trickeries, and that's one way to utilize your art resources, your artists, when they have time, that they would work on something that helps the business move forward. So to summarize, not having a mission, number one. Hiring, number two. Risk. Fundraising, a lot of risks there. Scale of the game, the big game, is a problem. Not being a learning machine, you need to think that the more knowledge you can get from the space, the better you will be at making games. And having these unrealistic expectations is something that I've seen a lot as a big risk. And then thinking about the publishing, having the confidence for your game before approaching the publishers. And then changes in the market, those are happening constantly. You need to be aware of competition coming into the market where your game is supposed to be in. And the designer risks about the system designer versus core designer. And then the coder and artist risk of what kind of like work culture you want to create for these people. So that was the presentation. Thanks, everybody. You should definitely go to elitegamedevelopers.com. I have a lot of stuff there under the blog section, and I'm happy to take a lot of questions now if we have more.
Thank you, Joachim. So do we have more questions? The first one, do you invest yourself in game startups?
I've done some angel investing. It's something that I'm, helping a lot of companies, and my main focus is to build elite game developers as a kind of like a content creation and this kind of knowledge sharing company where there are like premium courses, a lot of content made available. So that is my main focus. I'm not an investor, actually. So.
Thank you. More questions? Marcus is asking, is any of these risks more important to be noted, or are these all to be considered to as a whole concept?
All of these are kind of like, the gaming industry is so complex. So all of these are important, and you can learn from all of these for sure.
Thank you. Well, I have, in the meanwhile, question actually about your view towards, for example, something like this course. So education products on game business in business schools. So from pure business perspective, because this is only course which exists, and we've been it's purely because of our initiatives, myself and colleagues. And how do you see kind of the need of industry in terms of business professionals, or is it like anyone who knows how to design and create the game, any of people can run the business just as much?
If you have an appetite to be an entrepreneur, I think that's what you need, because you can learn stuff. So I think you have formal education like Aalto University. You can have informal education, which is basically everything online, what I'm doing at Elite Game Developers. Like I think it's up to like having an interest in this field, and then you can learn it for sure.
Thank you. And then one more question from Mika. Thank you, Joachim. I don't know if you can answer this. With Next Games, you went quite different route than many other startups. Why did you take this work for hire route instead of making your own IPs? How do you feel about it now after so many years?
Thanks, Mika. I think I need to clarify here one thing. We didn't do ever work for hire. So work for hire is a term where you're basically getting paid to build a game. So we always did it this way, that we gave royalties to the IP holder from the money that came in. So when somebody plays The Walking Dead, the money that they spend in the game comes to Next Games, and then Next Games pays a percentage to AMC, which is the IP holder. And I think the same goes for Stranger Things and the Blade Runner game. So I would say the thing with working with IPs, if that is the real question here, is that it's a big benefit to have something unique in your business. And it really helped us as a company to kind of unify the vision to be the best partner for entertainment IP holders in gaming. And that was what AMC always, like, we were having discussions and they were always saying that they felt that they feel that Next Games is their best partner for delivering gaming content on their IPs. So it was a good differentiator for sure.
We had actually Yanis last time. Last Thursday, Yanis from,
Yeah.
I can't say the Greek Yanis, I can say his surname. So it was, he gave a very elaborate lecture on marketing and user acquisition.
Yeah.
Mika, wait, now it's running so fast. Okay, wait. Okay, Mika is saying, thanks for clarifying, Joachim. Then the next question is from Mao E. While growing, you go from niche markets to mass market. These are two complete different domains. How do you change to your company to success in the mass market?
Like how do you change your company to succeed in the mass market? I think
that's what he meant. Yes, or she.
This is for like early stage startups. It should always be about the niche market, because then it's easier to know the end user, the player, the customer, like what they want. You can easily talk with them because you can, have one person, and then with mass market, you're going to have a lot of expectations. And with mass market, what usually happens is that there's competition there as well, because it is already a mass market. So I think you need a lot more money to compete on the mass market level. You need a bigger team of people who can take care of live operations, marketing, all sorts of things. Quality bar rises a lot higher, so you need to hire better quality assurance people, better graphic artists, whatever. Like, I think a niche is much more easier for a startup, and then you just need to have, a lot of financing behind you if you go after a big mass market.
Thank you. And now the next question from Christina. What kind of tips do you have for recruiting people when you are aware of these risks? We have such a strong meritocracy and superiority attitude in game development in Finland, and very little public talk about failed companies. So how do you actually recruit developers to realistic projects when it is very hard to get them excited about those?
That is true. It is tricky, but like I mentioned, that it's good to find some way to differentiate. You cannot differentiate with salary. You cannot really differentiate with giving stock options or equity, but you can differentiate with a unique vision, or what was the other thing? Well, like some unique group of people that are working already to figure this out. So yeah, it really depends on the idea. If you're building something that nobody else wants to work on, maybe the problem is the idea. I don't know. But like your enthusiasm and your storytelling, how you're talking about your idea, is always going to be anyways something that helps. even though it might feel superficial and wrong to be a really good, person who pitches ideas nicely, but it just works, unfortunately.
Thank you. It seems I skipped two questions. Then my chat line skipped very fast. Sorry, guys. But anyway, I'm going back now. So the question from Adnan: how do you focus on risk management without ruining the creative aspects of game development?
Well, it's great to have at least the CEO, the managing director of the company, who owns this kind of risk management, and they own the vision of the company, the mission, and they sort of like leave the game creation to the team. I think that's always been a recipe for some kind of success, that you had a managing director of the company not making the game. Like, that helps so much. There's some person who's the captain of the ship, who is already thinking a bit further than what we need to code today.
Thank you. And did I ask you already the question of Marcus? Is any of this risk more important to be noted, or are these all to be considered too as a whole concept? I think I did ask, or no?
Yes.
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 Okay, then I go down again. Yon is asking, what would you estimate is the percentage of mobile games startups that succeed, if we define it as actually making money? And would you say the mobile games market is even worth getting into, or is it oversaturated?
Estimation, probably 1% makes money. I have no data, unfortunately, but it's so hard. It's so hard. But yeah, like thinking about like, is it even worth getting into? It's oversaturated. I would say no, because you can always find something that people aren't just looking at right now, that now makes sense. Now is the right time to do this game, thinking about like something like from PC, something that has been always like something that there has been a niche audience on PC for these kind of games. But then you look at mobile, there's nobody making any games, or there's nothing equivalent from PC to mobile. Like, if you can sort of like find something like that, and then you can find some ways to actually make it work to feel nice on the mobile, where it's maybe, fits well for touchscreen controls, fits to the patterns that people usually like to play their games in, like short sessions many times a day. And then you start working on that. Then you suddenly notice that when you give it to people, they're like, this feels nice. I never played anything like this. So I think there's a lot of space there in mobile still.
Thank you. And well, I guess it's always like with any market. I mean, if your product is good, I mean, many markets are oversaturated if you think about it these days. But then, with the good product and good strategy, then the next question: there is no concrete pattern for success in gaming. Great people make great games. What is your view about this? Is personal solely drives games company success?
Personnel solidity.
Yes. Solidly, like if you see that the personnel is a really solid factor for the game company success.
Oh yeah, great bit. Yeah, I think there is some truth to this. That, like, I was talking about this game designer risk of having a system designer or core designer. I think this is a definition of a great game developer, is somebody who can wear both of those hats at the same time and think about like coming up with a product that really creates a new kind of experience that people want. So I think there is some truth to this. Of course, the idea might be that you've come up with an idea, but you always need to go the extra mile to prove the idea. So a lot of people might be really having good ideas, but they spent years making the game before they notice that, oh, I can't really prove it until we still add these and these things to the game, and it's taking forever, and they never get to the point where they can prove if it works or not. So I think like if you can get into the rhythm of getting many games out every year, that's great. Like my career, I probably only put out like something of like less than 10 games, and in a sense I've been in the game industry for so long, and it feels like a bad bad number, but it's so small. But it was always the case that the games that I worked on took like 2 years to put out. So yeah, there is some truth to your point.
Thank you. I think it's actually Ilkka Panen who said that, this phrase. And we are going to have him next month talking. Well, we can ask him again.
Yes.
And I think how I actually see it, again, and I haven't worked in game industry as such, I think it's good people does not mean a one person or one development, but a team.
Yeah.
The team should be able to oversee not only one aspect, that the game itself is working, but the whole process. And if everyone, at this how again I see it, is everyone is professional and kind of good at their own job with their own role in the team, then I think that what goes to the people, that it's very important. But it's not a one man's, well, I guess more often than not, it's not one man's sort of success.
Yeah.
Okay, very quickly, the rest of the questions. So Mia just saying excellent points, and I have faced already some of those while being a founder in very early phase small game studio. How much are you billing for consulting? Honest question, really. So, and I know Mia, Mia is working in a small indie game studio. So
yeah, it depends where you live in. So like, yeah, you can reach out to me actually to.
Yeah, there is details. And Joachim, if you can actually share your slides in PDF, I can put it on our course site, so we can write reflection on your class.
Yes, definitely. And you can reach me if anybody wants to ask about other stuff from me. You can always connect on LinkedIn. So that's a really good place to talk.
Yeah, but then 3 questions which are already there, and then we over. So are there any online communities in Finland for individual game developers like Steam?
There's on Facebook, there's the Play Finland and the IGDA Finland, and there's the Discord channels and Slack channels. I don't remember them, right now. I should actually create a catalog on my website about those. But yeah, at least those 2, Play Finland and IGDA Finland, are really good.
Thank you. Bureaucratic question, Solib asking, in Finnish corporate law regulations, does game companies considered as software service, or do they have separate entities? As game entrepreneur, did you ever have difficulties to convince or try fitting in those bureaucratic systems? If so, what should be improved, and what game creators can do to change those systems?
Yeah, I think this was a issue in 2005. Like my first company, there were people who were emailing me that I don't have my company address on my website, and weird things were happening back then. And a lot of scams about this kind of, that you need to be on different kind of lists, like this asiakastieto.fi sites and whatnot. I think those things are much more easier nowadays. And like when you start osakeyhtiö Oy in Finland, I think the costs are basically zero nowadays, when it used to be much higher, much harder to start a company nowadays. So I think it's so easy nowadays, and there's really good thinking about just accounting of it. Like when you need to get an accountant for your company, there's so many who are focused on tech startups nowadays who know how these companies work, and can make it very efficient for you to send them receipts and stuff like that in Google Drive, shared folders and things like that. It's so, I'd say, like, being an entrepreneur nowadays is like, that's the easy thing, is the legal stuff, the corporate law and those things. It's more about like, how do you come up with something that makes money in a sense.
That's universal. And the very last question, what are the niche markets you would enter today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, like I pointed out, that in mobile, I would go after some kind of space that where other people aren't looking into. Like, bigger companies don't want to go there. It feels too small for them, or it's not so, fancy. Maybe you do something that it's like, let's put out like some idea, like farming simulators, or there's a few mobile games like that, but some like weird simulator games, for instance, like, I don't know, transporting goods or something from, Africa to Europe or something like that, where you need to, tweak a lot of numbers and stuff like that. That would be a really cool, interesting, free-to-play game for sure.
What about fighting the coronavirus? Fighting some
Yeah,
kind of new virus, which I was wondering if it becomes, new genre in movies and games.
yeah. There's the pandemic game on mobile. I think you could do something like that. Maybe there hasn't been enough exploitation of the current situation. Like, there is the one game, I think it's called Pandemic, which is an old game, but I would say there's probably more games like that that could be made, and maybe people are already doing them. I don't know if it's a good niche or not, because everybody knows about it already.
Well, it's a reality.
But yeah, in a
Well,
sense, like, you can go after a niche where somebody has already proven something on a different platform. Like, then you take it to mobile, or that you take something from mobile to Nintendo Switch or something like that is also interesting.
well, thank you very much. A very insightful and useful, seemingly too many lecture. I hope, well, you will have success with your venture now or now onwards. And please, everyone, feel free to contact your team. Daniel is saying thanks, and David and Mika and Christina. So lots of thanks.
Yeah,
The
if you
presentation.
yeah, the newsletter that I write every Friday has a lot of details. I'm putting like 2 days of work into writing that newsletter. So if you want to ever read a really good game business newsletter, go to my website, to elitegamedevelopers.com, and sign up.
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.